This program contains graphic content. Viewer discretion is advised. The Dark Knight Trilogy. 3 films that changed Hollywood forever.
The Dark Knight was a picture that was so good, it could have won Best Picture that year.
At a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, a Joker-like villain uses the latest Batman release as his location for murder.
No one would have ever expected what ended up happening.
Still right now, I could see that white flash from his gun and just his silhouette in there.
And all around them, bullets are being shot.
You never think that going to the movies is going to turn into one of the biggest mass shootings in history.
It's one of the most infamous copycat crimes in America.
The perpetrator of this evil act has received a lot of attention.
A killer with a disgusting joke.
The Joker, he's a fictional character. Holmes is a real human being who carried that out.
For over 70 years, Batman entertains American audiences in comic books, on TV, and on the silver screen.
Batman comes from the DC comic family. I even remember it as a television show, which is very campy with the little balloons that say, "Pow!"
But in 2005, a darker Batman emerges.
I think that the Dark Knight trilogy is the latest and most compelling of all of the Batman franchise.
And with it comes a villain so real and haunting, audiences are left stunned.
Everyone in the audience was blown away by Heath Ledger's performance. He didn't look like any other or sound like any other Joker.
It's a terrifying depiction. It will soon be the backdrop to one of the worst mass shootings in American history.
Aurora 911, where's your emergency? But I can't hear you. Give me the address again. There's some check. What address?
And he was just firing right and loud. Boom, boom, the loudest sound you can hear.
The killer?
You need anything?
A real-life Joker.
Oxygen.
James Holmes was a deeply, deeply disturbed person.
James Egan Holmes is born and raised in the tiny town of Castroville, California, to a seemingly picture-perfect American family.
James Holmes was the product of a very brilliant family. His father had multiple degrees from Stanford, UCLA. His mother was a registered nurse.
From a superficial standpoint, his life does seem picture perfect. But it wasn't. Interactions caused him severe social anxiety. He was a very bright student, the smartest in the class, but he didn't have a personality that drew people to him. So here you have this really strange dynamic of someone who's bright, who has choices, the potential for scholarships, to be anything he wants to be, yet he's a loser when it comes to socializing.
Instead of making friends, James spends all of his time playing video games.
And so after school, once the day was completed, James tended to isolate. And it was torture for his parents.
In his room, James suffers from hallucinations, a mental health issue that runs in his family.
This wasn't the family's first exposure to mental health. There were family members who did suffer from mental health issues.
James begins to hear ferocious banging on his bedroom walls, which he calls nail ghosts.
It's one thing if these nightmares or these hallucinations happen once or twice. But it appears that these were consistent as James grew up.
Although James is terrified, he doesn't tell anyone about the voices in his head.
If he's not reporting it to his parents, if they're not seeking a therapist, then the secret remains with James.
But his parents finally realize their son has serious issues when he tries to commit suicide.
One psychiatrist had diagnosed him as a schizotypal personality disorder. It's an individual that has significant social anxiety.
Do you want to talk about it?
They did seek a therapist, and they did go as a family for counseling. They did it for a year, but they stopped. James told them he was feeling better.
It's just an act, and James quickly reverts back to a life of isolation.
He really found himself developing this persona in video games.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Die. And die. And die.
He spends so much time retreating to this game that he eventually becomes one of the top players in the world.
The only thing he values more than video games is movies.
Movies can be an escape. They can take us from our lives, our dull, drab, boring lives.
I think that up to this point, James Holmes didn't really have a goal in life.
But his life is about to change. In 2008, James decides to see the movie everyone is talking about, The Dark Knight.
James was drawn to this. This particular film is a little darker, a little bit grittier.
James Holmes binge watches it. He loves it. He's completely consumed by it.
One character in particular enraptures James.
He is drawn to the Joker character. And you have to ask yourself, why? The Joker doesn't really have any friends. The Joker doesn't really belong. Yet, people are fearful of him.
When I think of the Joker, I think of someone who has no moral compass, who doesn't even mind that he's hurting people, regardless of age group, gender, doesn't matter. He just likes chaos. He just likes to see things blow up just for the hell of it.
Like the Joker, James is both brilliant and deeply disturbed.
The character that Heath Ledger played, and played brilliantly as a Joker, was just the type of figure that James Holmes needed to fill an empty space, I think, in his own life.
And while Heath Ledger's Joker haunts most audiences, James is inspired by the comic book villain.
He wants attention from people, and he wants people to fear him, to respect him, to know that he is the one who has the power that can hurt them.
In James Holmes's sadistic mind, a deadly plan forms.
It's hard to wrap your head around something like that.
I got people running out of the theater, they're shot.
I think it changed how people feel in a movie theater.
In 2008, The Dark Knight captures audiences by giving the Batman vs. Joker storyline a new jolt of energy.
The performances were great, the action was great, the production design, the sound. Every little twist and turn that the characters went through, you could feel them, and you could feel them in a visceral way.
Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker leaves audiences speechless. But it's his sudden death before the film's premiere that draws audience members even closer to his character.
He overdosed. I think that people were shocked at the news of Heath Ledger's death. Heath Ledger's role as the Joker is such an important part of The Dark Knight, and for a lot of viewers, it was the best part.
Reportedly, he kept a journal, and within that journal, he continued to write his thoughts and how he was turning into this kind of monster and formulating how the Joker thought.
After learning about Ledger's journal, James decides to pen one as well.
There is one more battle to fight with life.
In his notebook, he writes something that the Joker said. The message is there is no message.
It's a bunch of angry rantings that are confusing and perplexing from a self-absorbed, tortured, and conflicted young man.
Overcome all fear and certain death.
James's thoughts are terrifyingly similar to the Joker's madness. He writes a question throughout his journal that the Joker even asks in The Dark Knight.
One of the lines that the Joker says in the movie must have really resonated with him.
Why so serious? If you look at his journal, the message is to create total chaos. There is no message. It's to destroy, just like the Joker.
For now, James manages to conceal his mental illness from the world. James graduates from high school top among his class. He enrolls in a university in Colorado. While at college, James gets his bachelor's degree and even sets out for a PhD in neuroscience. But even though he's a bright student, James still can't fit in.
Every time he tried to interact with a girl, a peer, he was full of anxiety and also some paranoia. You can be brilliant, but if you can't talk to people, you're really at a deficit.
Despite this, around February 2012, James Holmes meets a girl.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
I saw how well you did in neuroscience earlier today, and I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions.
Okay.
James did have a girlfriend. Originally, she found him very intelligent and very, very witty in his writing.
For the first time in his life, James thinks things are finally going his way. But his social anxiety interferes.
It seems like this was just a typical college romance. At least for the girl, it seemed casual. For James, it seemed that it was becoming more intense. James liked her more than she liked him.
While at school, James and his girlfriend have a falling out.
At one point, James wasn't doing so well in a particular class. And James said, well, I really want to kill people. So she said, I guess to try to bring some levity into the situation, why don't you kill me? James said, well, I can't really do that. I would get into trouble.
His girlfriend breaks up with him.
For James, it was just like someone had slapped him across the face. He was devastated. This was actually his first girlfriend, and he didn't want it to end.
It's a devastating blow to an already fragile mind. After the breakup, James's behavior during a laboratory science class echoes his favorite villain.
One similarity that is very clear between the Joker and James was the Joker, of course, always has that constant smirk. James also sometimes had a smirk.
His classmates at school encouraged James to seek professional help.
It's around this time that they begin to notice a change in him, so they suggest he go seek out some psychiatric help.
And he agreed and made an appointment with a psychiatrist.
James, come on back. So, James.
And within the sessions, he did talk incessantly about his homicidal thoughts.
I've been thinking a lot. I've been cruising the web a lot and looking up a lot of pictures of guns. And a bullet's only about that big, but that bullet can like crack your skull. It's just such perfect chaos and perfect destruction.
So, have you been pursuing this beyond the internet?
The psychiatrist tries to treat James, but he's already lost. James eventually stops attending school and drops out of therapy.
The worst thing for James was to be left home alone with his thoughts, because he just kept perseverating about people and about the anxiety they caused him and how people rejected him, and he wanted to get even.
In his one-bedroom apartment, James researches weapons and explosive materials like a villain preparing for chaos.
If he had any real social goals he wanted to attain, he clearly had abandoned that. He was a loner. If he really took that phrase to heart, upset the established order, and everything becomes chaos, then what's he gonna do? Okay, we see how the Joker accomplishes on screen. So what's he gonna do with that?
When we look at James' journal, this is an individual that is having grave conflicts within himself, within his identity, within his brain. He knows things aren't working. And beneath it all are the workings of a lot of rage.
James buys his first rifle on June 7th, 2012. He plans to use it to get back at a world that doesn't understand him. Just like the Joker in the movie The Dark Knight.
Now, the Joker sought vengeance. He was a very vengeful individual. He didn't belong, and he didn't want to belong. Now, for James, he wanted to belong, but he suffered from severe social anxiety. And eventually, it's quite possible that he sought his revenge on people, on society.
Over the course of 3 months, James received several packages containing explosive materials he's purchased online. During this time, his obsession with the Joker takes another twisted turn.
He called the owner of an arsenal to follow up on an appointment.
Hi. I have a bit of a problem.
And he left a message. And the message was this garbled, crazy sound like the Joker. So in James's mind, he not only was thinking like the Joker, but he was speaking like the Joker.
At the university I go to, there's a lot of people there. They're just all over the place. No clue what to do with them. So what I like to do is squash them one by one by one So I think I need some guns. Lots of guns.
The fact that James Holmes wanted to model his life after the Joker character in The Dark Knight then made the story even scarier.
James has one final plan for a world that has seemingly forgotten him.
James is going back to the theater. But it isn't to see a film. It's to destroy.
And a passage from his journal reveals the final act. Warner Brothers' The Dark Knight trilogy proves to audiences that a well-loved superhero can be reborn on the silver screen.
I think the Dark Knight film redefined what a superhero movie could be. Even the fact that Batman himself could feel pain. In most superhero movies, that's not something you associate with a superhero.
Even the classic battle between Batman and the Joker gets a new facelift.
Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker is very different from other actors in the past. Really sociopathic, really evil, lacking empathy, a schemer, a manipulator, someone to be feared.
Colorado resident James Holmes wants revenge against a society of people he feels never truly understood him.
I think that James Holmes, once he decided that he was going to step out of polite society and become his own version of the Joker character, he doesn't really take on any accomplices.
It's one thing to think like the Joker. It's another thing when James starts to become the Joker, putting on a show, and within that show, wanting to scare people.
But the terror James wishes on people is more frightening than that of any movie character. James starts to scout public venues and takes notes of their layout.
And so he scouts, and he finds a theater. It's perfect. James then can be the Joker on stage.
James writes about the scouting mission in his journal. For his final performance, James changes his look.
In the time leading up to the July 2012 shooting, James' behavior continues to change. He dyes his hair bright orange. His appearance really led people to believe that he was inspired by the Joker.
And James has the perfect movie in mind for his evil plot. The third installment in the Batman trilogy, The Dark Knight Rises, has just been released. But before James executes his plan, he has a message for the world.
It's interesting to note that he sent this therapist his notebook. Where he had burned $20 bills, just like the Joker.
That's not a direct parallel to the Joker in that scene where he burns up millions of dollars. I don't know what is. It just shows me how much James Holmes wanted to embody the character of the Joker in The Dark Knight.
On July 20th, 2012, James Holmes buys a ticket for the 12 a.m. showing of The Dark Knight Rises.
The Dark Knight Rises was a highly anticipated film. So the excitement in the movie theater that night was palpable.
His plan is set into motion.
It's opening night. There's an excitement in the air. People love these films, so they all come to see them.
Marcus Weaver and his friend Rebecca Wingo also have tickets to see the movie.
Everyone was really excited about this movie. I got the seats, and I really thought they were great seats, right in the middle,
And James is there, taking all this in, seeing all these people, seeing all these happy people, these excited people, people with smiles on their face, all ready to see a great show.
James has studied this theater for several weeks.
His audience has no idea. They don't have a clue. They're truly innocent. All they think is that they're here to watch a film they've waited to see, and they're excited.
He chooses a seat close to the door so he can leave it ajar and exit to his car waiting outside with his weapons.
It's the moment James has been planning. But he is starting to have second thoughts.
He decides to call a crisis clinic, hopefully to ask for help, hopefully for an intervention. Hopefully to have someone stop him from this madness. But then he hangs up. And gets ready to kill.
Still right now, I could see that white flash from his gun and just his silhouette.
911, where's your emergency? At Century Theaters, 14300 East Alameda Avenue. 453, I have a party shot here. I need rescue hot.
On July 20th, 2012, Warner Brothers releases its newest Batman film. Director Christopher Nolan and his brother Jonathan become household names in Hollywood.
I think the Nolan brothers, Jonathan as the writer and Chris as the director, revitalized the franchise.
The Dark Knight Rises is to be the final installment in a very successful trilogy.
I think that one of the ways that The Dark Knight really touched audiences was that the struggles on the screen, I think, were very close to struggles that people have every day. They really are fighting their own personal demons, and sometimes those demons get the best of them.
In Aurora, Colorado, James Holmes has been fighting his demons for as long as he can remember.
He's dropped out of his doctoral program. He stopped seeing his therapist. He's all alone now. He doesn't really have a life anymore.
In the theater parking lot, James arms himself with the weapons he's been buying for the past few months.
He's ready to go back into his theater and be the Joker. He's ready to give his performance to his unsuspecting audience.
In attendance that evening is Marcus Weaver.
From the right of the screen, you could tell that somebody had came through the door. It really made me mad because it was ruining the movie. It was the loudest sound I've ever heard.
And people start to run.
It was just constant boom, 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 boom.
Aurora 911, where's your emergency? I can't hear you. Give me the address again. There's some check. What address? Aurora 911, where's your emergency?
There was a shooting in our theater at Century 16 off the stable by the Aurora Mall.
Okay, so you're over there. Are you at the Century 16?
Century 16, we're employees. We're in our break room. There is someone firing multiple shots, multiple rounds of shots in our theater.
Help on the way. Listen to me. Do you know what theater they're inside?
What theater's that? Theater 9.
Entry 14 for a shooting at Century Theaters, 14300 East Alameda Avenue. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
And the stickiness of being on the floor of a theater meant nothing at that time. I was more concerned about my life. Things were just flashing in my head and thoughts were racing through my mind. And then I could see him, just his silhouette.
We need rescue inside the auditorium, multiple victims. I got 7 down in theater 9. 7 down.
I got another person outside shot in the leg, a female. I got people running out of the theater that are shot.
Law enforcement arrives at the theater. People are running for their lives.
I need rescue at the back door, theater 9 now.
People are covered in blood.
453, I have a party shot here, need rescue. I got a whole bunch of people shot out here, no rescue. I need as many ambulances as we can to the Dillard's lot. I've got 1 ambulance here. Where are my ambulances at? Do I have permission to start taking some of these victims via car? Yeah, load them up, get them in cars, get them out of here.
And they're frantically searching for a shooter.
No sign of the perpetrator.
In all the chaos, no one realizes that the shooter is walking among them.
After the shooting, James Holmes, covered in armor, walks out of the theater. He could have blended in. There's been a SWAT team called. They're wearing similar gear.
For a moment, it appears that James Holmes is going to succeed and escape, just like a Joker. But he doesn't. He remains. He's become the Joker. He's killed as he set out to do, and now he wants the glory and recognition.
It wasn't until a law enforcement officer noticed this man standing at his car wearing armor, like he's a member of the SWAT team, but he was not.
I need a marked car behind the theater, stable side. Got a suspect in a gas mask.
Who you with?
Show me your hands.
Hands!
That white car in the rear of the lot, is that a suspect? Yes, we've got rifles, gas masks. Okay, hold that position, hold your suspect.
That's when they discovered it was James Holmes who was the shooter.
But the night is a long way from over.
After the shooting, James Holmes tells police about his apartment, which is booby-trapped, and warns police there are explosives there, so you have to get there now.
Suspect claims to have explosives. We need an EOD unit.
Hello?
The Dark Knight trilogy reinvents the way fans look at comic book movies.
To make a film really work, in my opinion, you have to have a believable and strong good guy or protagonist, and you have to have an equally menacing and believable bad guy.
In Aurora, Colorado, James Holmes is proving to be the ultimate villain. He has just killed multiple people inside a movie theater. And he isn't finished with his copycat crime.
Like the Joker, James seemed to want to play games. He didn't just want to do a mass killing in a theater.
Suspect claims to have explosives. We need an EOD unit.
In the movie, the Joker is set up 2 ferry boats filled with people, and on the opposite ferry boat is a detonator to eliminate the other ferry boat. And the way that the Joker's played his game is that if you don't detonate the other ferry boat, they're gonna detonate for you, and if nobody does anything, I'm gonna detonate both.
Reminiscent of the Joker's behavior in The Dark Knight, James Holmes has rigged his apartment with explosives.
While all this is going on, back at James's apartment, back at his lair, a neighbor next door is becoming very annoyed. And she's becoming annoyed because James's music is blaring. And that neighbor wants that music lowered.
She is walking directly into his trap.
In his living room, Holmes had 30 canisters filled with explosives, pickle jars filled with napalm and bullets, plastic soda bottles filled with gasoline. These were essentially improvised grenades.
Hello?
So the neighbor knocks on the door, no answer, realizes the door's open. But then, thankfully, decides not to go in. And goes back and calls the police. It's a good thing she didn't go in. Because if she had, by opening James's door, would trigger the bombs and explosives.
Authorities rush to James's apartment building to try and prevent a second epic tragedy.
They had to enter through a window. They had to use the services of a bomb robot as not to endanger anyone's life on their team any further.
The robot could actually go to the apartment and investigate without the fear of any of the bombs exploding and killing someone. And slowly but surely, the robot was able to cut those wires and to make sure that no explosives could go off.
It took police 48 hours, 2 days, to get into the apartment and to disarm the bombs and the booby traps that James Holmes had set.
Had James's neighbor opened the door, hundreds more could have died.
And thankfully, his neighbor hadn't opened the door, because that amount of explosives would have annihilated everyone within a mile radius.
In the aftermath of James's twisted plot, a nation mourns from this senseless tragedy.
Although the perpetrator of this evil act has received a lot of attention over the last couple of days, that attention will fade away. And in the end, after he has felt the full force of our justice system, what will be remembered are the good people who were impacted by this tragedy.
12 innocent people are dead.
It was very frightening because that could have been your sister, your neighbor, your girlfriend, your cousin. It could have been anyone. Everyone goes to the movies. It made me feel like nowhere is safe.
Among the casualties is Marcus's friend, Rebecca.
Well, they always say that, you know, things happen for a reason, but for that reason, I struggled really hard with it.
The theater attack is regarded as one of the worst mass shootings in American history.
You never think that going to the movies is going to turn into one of the biggest mass shootings in history. You think, I'm here to enjoy myself. You don't think I'm here and I'm going to be cowering for my life.
James is charged with first-degree murder.
Did you need anything? Oxygen.
He pleads not guilty by reason of insanity.
He had this seemingly permanent smirk on his face.
The Joker always had that same grin on his face too, so the similarities are strangely very familiar to each other.
Would the defendant please stand for the reading of the final sentencing verdict forms?
Ultimately, the court found James Holmes guilty. His insanity plea didn't hold up because he had plotted and planned this attack so methodically that there was no way he could fall back on the insanity plea.
They find him guilty on 24 counts of first-degree murder plus 140 counts of attempted murder.
If there was ever a case that warranted the maximum sentences, this is the case.
Holmes' sentence is 24 life sentences to be served consecutively. He is also given 3,318 years without parole.
To the jury, James's appearance made them so uneasy. The smirk on his face, the lack of connectedness. They couldn't relate to him. They didn't know what was going on. He wasn't the brilliant student that they had heard about.
He was spared the death penalty, though, because one juror felt that he should just be jailed for life and not receive the death penalty. And in Colorado, it needs to be a full jury who decides on the death penalty. If you have one juror who's unsure, you can't give the death penalty.
I am 100% sure that these are just and fair. I want to make it clear that it is the court's intention that the defendant never set foot in free society again. Get the defendant out of my courtroom, please. Thank you.
For James Holmes, the show is over. But America has yet to heal from this senseless act of violence.
When it first happened, it was hard to wrap your head around it all, but as, you know, it's almost going on the 5th year, I can see it more and more now than before.
You don't think a movie theater in small-town Colorado is going to be the scene of a national tragedy.
God really had mercy on my life that day, and I'm very thankful for that because I've been able to, you know, tell this story and share my experience with others who maybe have went through some traumatic things themselves.